Yesterday I left you with the famous enigmatic Tikkun Zohar that says that when the Torah writes the words Yom Kippurim, meaning the 10th day of Tishrei, the day of atonement, you could pronounce the letters Yom Kippurim, a day like Purim. And yes, indeed, you could pronounce it that way. Only, it's not at all obvious what the thought would be. On the surface, Purim and Yom Kippur seem to be absolute opposites. And even though connections are made between Yom Kippur and Purim in various places, connections, for example, on Yom Kippur, you don't have a feast. Maybe the feast of Purim makes up for that in some sense. It fills in the missing feasting that a holiday like Yom Kippur ought to have. That connection doesn't explain why they're comparable, why they have something in common, why they're similar. The contrary, that's built on the fact that they're different. The one is a fast and the other is a feast. I'm not talking just any old connection. We're talking about a connection which makes them appear similar to one another. And as I pointed out yesterday, when you say A is like B, that's not the same as saying B is like A. To say A is like B means B has some quality and A approximates B. So we're going to say that Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. There has to be some quality that Purim has, and Yom Kippur sort of has it, but not to the consistency and fundamental nature that Purim has it. It sort of sounds like it's the tail wagging the dog. Why would Yom Kippur have to imitate Purim? So I want to explain this to you, and I want to start by giving you some background of things that you probably know, but I'll show you how they bear on this Tikkun Zohar. A key feature of the human being, while in this temporary state of being, is free will. I'm hinting here at a whole story, but I'm not going to go through it now. Now, free will requires opposing motivations. So I'll give you an example that a philosopher wrote in the Journal of Philosophy some decades ago, which I thought was very, very good example of this. He wasn't commenting on our thought system, but general free will. Let's imagine you're at a party at an estate, and people are milling around and drinking and eating and talking, and there's a pool. You're standing next to the pool, and you see an 18-month-old baby fall into the pool. There's nobody else there, just you. You see it. Well, you have two choices. You could put your hand, grab the shirt of the pool of the baby and pull him out and save his life. Or you can do nothing and let him drown. So this philosopher asks, let's check your motivation. Now, don't make up an imaginary monster. Think about yourself. What motivations do you have in favor of saving his life? Well, it's a human life, and the parents will love you forever, and it will certainly help your reputation, and you'll have the approval of your own conscience. There are a lot of things going for the idea of saving the child. Okay, now let's try the other side. What motivations do you have against saving the child? I think, if you're like most normal people, there aren't any. You don't have any motivations to just let the child die. What are you afraid of, getting your pants wet? No, you won't get your pants wet. You hold it at arm's length and put it down on the lawn. So if that's the case, says this philosopher, I don't remember his name, then you're not exercising free will when you save his life. Because nothing is motivating you against the action of saving his life. Free will requires that there be competition in motivation, and by free will you choose which side to activate, to realize. But if there's no competing motivation at all, then you're functioning like a machine. You're not making a free choice. I think that's a convincing argument. It definitely is our point of view. The Ramchal says this in the Derech Hashem, in the way of God, word for word. And therefore, he says, we are created with two opposing sets of innate motivation. And the names for them are Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, good inclination and evil inclination. Watch the way Ramchal does this. Good and evil are by definition opposing forces. So if you have an inclination to the good and an inclination to the evil, then obviously you're going to suffer ambivalence many times. Not in everything you do. Sometimes there will be no conflict, but many times there will be conflict. And when there's conflict between them, that's when you have free will. And then he says, the body was created to embody the Yetzer Hara, and the soul was created to embody the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination. So the body and soul as opposing forces are created for a purpose. They're created to embody this conflicting motivation. And that's what gives the human being free will. When the Ramchal in that Sefer classifies the whole of creation, there are different categories of things that are created. But one feature sets the human being aside from all the other categories, and that is that the human being is a hybrid. That human being is a compound of two separate entities, a soul and a body. A soul is a spiritual thing, and a body is a physical thing, and he's a compound. No other creature is a compound. Each creature has its composition from a single category of being. And the reason why we are compounds is in order to give us free will. And that's why the other creatures aren't compounds, because they don't have free will. Okay, for angels, there's some peripheral idea of 1/4%. I'm not going into that now. But that's the general structure of which the world is created. So human beings, I start off with this double composition. Now, that means the human being lives a life of conflict. What is his strategy and what is his goal in living this life of conflict? Well, one, he's got to accommodate the conflict, and the successful accommodation is that the soul should dictate to the body, train the body, operate on the body in such a way that the actions that the soul and body perform together, we mentioned this the other day, that the human being, the agent, is the soul and the body together. That was the parable of the blind man and the crippled man. That the two together are the ones who carry out the action, that the action should be appropriate actions. And that's a struggle because the body resists. So, 363 days a year, the goal is to manage that struggle and ensure the right outcome. Now, there are two possible results for succeeding at this struggle. Now, imagine a person who succeeds in the sense that every time there's a struggle what to do, he does the right thing. Such a thing is either possible, or it's possible for some few, or almost possible. They may miss out once or twice, but it's almost possible that the outcome of the struggle should be consistently, sort of like a chess master who wins all of his games except when he plays other chess masters. There's a struggle, but he wins the struggle. What is the effect on the body of consistently winning the struggle? And here there are two possibilities. Either you just keep winning, that's all. You struggle and you win, you struggle and you win. But it's also possible that the process of struggling and winning changes the character of the body. It creates a sort of inner focus in the body. It creates an inner direction in the body, so that after a while, the body also, I would say almost spontaneously, goes in the direction that the soul wants. Let me give you an example of this that you're all familiar with. Think of a person who's acquiring a new habit. It can be how to type a typewriter, or a keyboard, or how to play the trumpet, or how to do a dance routine. At the beginning, it may be clumsy, and it requires his attention. and he may make mistakes, and that mistakes have to be corrected. But often, after a while, it becomes second nature. And he can do it without thinking at all. You can program the body with a new capability by training it in that way. Anyone who's learned to play a musical instrument knows this in gold. You do that all the time. The same thing can be true with moral struggles. A person has a desire, and he struggles with the desire at the beginning. Sometimes he overcomes the desire, sometimes he doesn't. But if he consistently overcomes the desire, then its natural reinforcement, when it's satisfied, is short-circuited. And then, because the natural reinforcement is short-circuited, the body's desire's intensity decreases. There's a long story. I won't bother with all the dynamics of the story, but the idea was someone was suffering from an anger problem. Now, 25 years ago or 30 years ago, there was a really stupid psychological theory which said, if you're angry, yell, express it, don't bottle it up. Because if you bottle it up, you're just going to build up tension. And if you build up tension, then you'll come to explode. You may explode in some place where there's no reason for it, no purpose for it. Better to get it out of you, get it out. Get it off your chest. What they didn't realize is every time you act out your anger, you're reinforcing the anger. And then the anger reinforces the behavior. It's a cycle. Because when you act out the anger, what you're expressing is something's really wrong. Something's really bad. And it's terrible. And if it's really terrible, then it's right to be angry about it. If it's right to be angry about it, then it's really terrible. Because it's a cycle. If you put your foot in the door of the behavior, although you will feel frustrated and not expressing it, but after a while, the very anger itself dissipates. It weakens. So one of the outcomes of training the body can be, I'm not saying this is guaranteed, but it can be that the impulses that were at one time opposing the soul either get eliminated or get weakened, or can be gerrymandered into expression which is an appropriate expression, and then the pressure to do the wrong thing goes down. So those are the two possible outcomes. Now, put that on the side, and let's go back to Yom Kippur and Purim. We have this struggle between the soul and the body. I wanted to claim that struggle is the subject of one's spiritual life 363 days a year. Those days are what I could call two-dimensional days. The two dimensions of the human being are both on the table, interacting, and need attention. Yom Kippur and Purim are one-dimensional days, not two-dimensional. Now you know from the practice of Yom Kippur that the body is given very little expression. The body is put on back burner. No eating, no drinking, no washing, no anointing with oil, no shoes, no family relations. Body's put on the back burner. And I didn't think of this before, but this is a good example of what I just said. Because actively in behavior it's put on the back burner, it also takes back burner status vis-a-vis your consciousness. Just take eating and drinking. When you get to the last prayer of the day, Ne'ilah, where it's an hour till the end of Yom Kippur, almost no one, maybe there are a few, but almost no one looks at his watch and says, an hour to the Coke. That's not what's going on. In their minds, there's a spiritual drama going on, and the eating and drinking just doesn't play any role. It's pushed out of consciousness. So the Yom Kippur is a day in which you're not concentrating on bringing the body into line with the soul. The whole functioning of the body and consciousness of the body is put on the side, and the soul is expressing itself without that struggle with the body. That makes it a one-dimensional day. Now, on Purim, there is mention of a practice of getting drunk. This is controversial and defined variously in various sources, but you have heard correctly that there is mention of an idea of getting drunk on Yom Kippur. superficially, you could say, well, what does the drunkenness do? It blots out the soul's control of the body. Conscious, deliberate control. What will the consequence of this action be? Is it better to do this and better to do that? It's hard to access and to apply when you're inebriated. So, in a sense, what Yom Kippur and Purim share is that each is a one-dimensional day. And Yom Kippur is the day of the soul, and Purim is the day of the body, because the conscious control of the soul is weakened or distracted, or to some cases just blotted out, and the body gets to operate on its own. Now that's an element that could be in common between the 2 days, but it still doesn't explain why Yom Kippur is considered to be only an approximation to Purim. And here's what I think the answer is. What's going to happen when the person gets drunk and the body operates on its own? Well, that depends upon what he's accomplished the other 363 days a year when he was forcing, training, focusing, directing, and managing the body to do the right thing. Was the body still wild, like a wild horse that has to be controlled and forced to ride peacefully so the rider can get to his destination? If that's true, then when there's no rider, the horse is going to be wild. So when you blot out the control of the soul of the body will do things that are utterly inappropriate. I know someone, this is many years ago, and nobody knows who he is, so I think I can mention the incident. I know someone, lovely person, and a really dedicated Jew. He had a few small children, and he lived in a place where it was an apartment, and there was a wall. And on Purim, he got drunk, and he picked up one of his children on his shoulders and climbed up on the wall to dance. That was very dangerous. He had no clue what he was doing. He was just climbing up and dancing. When he found out later, he was horrified. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. The body will do things that are dangerous or inappropriate in any way. That's not what it's about. But then there's the second possibility, that when the soul's blotted out and the body expresses itself, if the training of the body has elevated the body, if it has spiritualized the body, if it has focused the body so that the body itself is oriented towards what the soul wants, then you see something very remarkable. That the body too wants the holy, wants the pure, and wants the spiritual. The body, which is created to be a foil for the soul, an opposition for the soul, like a training partner for a boxer, someone will hit him so that he'll be able to hit stronger. It becomes an ally. A person who gets drunk under those conditions reveals something very deep. This idea that the body can be trained in that way also. One second. So now, that being the case, I want to explain to you how this answers my question. You see, in Yom Kippur, although it's the day of the soul, and only the soul expresses itself, it still has 2 dimensions. It's just that one dimension is taking the center stage, the other dimension is deprived of functioning. The very reason that you have to fast and not anoint yourself with oil and so forth and so on is because there is a body. There is a body, and it has to be deprived so that it won't take up space in the experience and the behavior of the day. So the picture you get of a human being on Yom Kippur is he's 2-dimensional, all right, but he's taking care that only that one dimension should express itself. So it's a one-dimensional day in terms of expression, even though the human being remains 2-dimensional in terms of his makeup. But in Yom Kippur, but on Purim, what you see is that the soul, the body itself, isn't inherently, isn't permanently, isn't inescapably oriented against the soul, that's only temporary. You can operate on it to a point where it becomes an ally of the soul, and here the one-dimensionality goes all the way through to the bottom. There's only one-dimensional, and it's all spiritual. It's all holy. It's all good. That's a much deeper vision. On Yom Kippur, there are two dimensions and only one gets expressed. Here, you see that really it isn't two opposed dimensions. Yes, the body and soul are not identical, but they're both on the same team. They're both on the same team. That's a much deeper vision. One way that this is expressed, I'll give you something visual to think about. Everything in the world has its existence maintained by, in Kabbalistic sources, this is a parable, sparks of light which are holy. You don't see the sparks of light because the sparks are encased in opaque shells, which capture the light. Now let's imagine we wanted to engineer that the light of the sparks should spread without barrier. There are two solutions, and this will divide religions, by the way. One solution is obliterate the shells, annihilate the shells, and then the light of the spark will just spread. That's one way. There's another way. Make the shells transparent. The shell is still there, but it's transparent. If it's transparent, the light gets through, not by shining through the cracks, but by interacting with the atoms in the glass. But it comes through, and now if you curve the glass, that can focus the light, so that the beam of light you get later is a result of the spark plus the glass, plus the shell. The two of them together are making the beam. That's the kind of cooperation that can be achieved from the body. It can become an ally of the light, an ally of the soul. And then they're just like one continuous operation with different facets at different levels, but it's one continuous operation. That shows a unity of purpose and a unity of goal and a unity of operating together, which you don't see in Yom Kippur. And that's why I think that the one-dimensionality of Purim is much greater than the one-dimensionality of Yom Kippur. And that's why Tikkun Zohar says Yom Kippur is like Purim, not the other way around. And now comes the bitter kicker from the discussion, which you've probably already guessed. If you're drinking and becoming drunk in Yom Kippur is going to show that your body has been elevated and spiritualized and is attached to the good and the holy and everything else, then by all means you can get drunk. But if it isn't, and it's just going to be like one guy said to me, a newcomer here, he said, Rabbi, I found out that Judaism is a realistic religion because once a year you can get really soused. You can get really sopped. You can just drink yourself into oblivion. At least once a year, that's realistic. And I said to him, not really. Not really. That's not the purpose of it, to become soused. So that's my recommendation. Otherwise, I recommend that you follow what the Ramah, who's the decider for Ashkenazi Jewry, which is that you should drink a little bit more than usual and to take a nap, and then you will fulfill the idea of not knowing the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. And something that has occurred to me this morning in my discussion with Chavus about these matters, I'll just put it in now, and then we'll stop to take questions. The Gemara says you should drink until you don't know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. It occurred to me this morning, something I'm sure that it's discussed, but it never occurred to me. The word until in English and ad in Hebrew is ambiguous. When you say until Q, you can mean up to but stopping before Q, or you can mean up to and including Q. That in Hebrew is called ad b'chlal or ad v'lo ad b'chlal. I'll give you an example. You're eligible for the discount until your 15th birthday. So on your 15th birthday, do you get it? No. That's the cutoff. You don't get it anymore. Cook until well done. When it's over, what's the status of the food? it's well done, right? So sometimes until means up to but not including, and sometimes it means up to and including. So when the Gemara said drink until, you don't know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman, does it mean up to, until, and including so that you don't know? Or does it mean up to and until, and when you see it coming around the corner, another whiskey, I'm going to be there. Stop before you get there. Because it's ad v'lo ad bichlal. My Chavus was reading to me from the Pischei Tshuva, and he said that there's someone there who says it's a limit on what you should do in drinking. It's a limit. It's not a goal to achieve, it's a limit to set, not to get there. And everybody says you shouldn't get to the point where you do irresponsible behavior. The Marshal talks about, others talk about it. Anyway, so that's my recommendation as far as drinking is concerned. I don't know about you, but given where I am in my spirituality and all the rest, I'd be very cautious about it. My Rabbi said not to get drunk, and I never got drunk in Peru. I would be very, very cautious about it. Now, finally, your question, yeah.
Sorry. So, trying to understand what you mean by having the body follow the soul, meaning, like, what if a person can control themselves on alcohol? You know, like they can control what they're doing for the most part. You know, obviously there's some things that, you know, like I can't daven. I can't daven when I'm drunk because I just can't follow. But I can still think about spiritual things and stay within like a certain realm of being. You know, but if it.
Oh yes, that I think impairing your ability to do certain mitzvahs in a certain way, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
The question is whether it's going to trigger negative behavior.
Crazy.
But no, I think that's right. That's right. And some say the idea of not being able to tell the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman, in Hebrew, those two phrases have exactly the same numerical value. The question is, would you be able to calculate it? Let's see, Aleph, okay. Oh, Rur, Aleph, Resh, Vav. What did I start with? Aleph? Oh, yeah, Aleph, Resh. I mean, it could be problematic, to do the calculation, given the state of inebriation. That would be something else. But that, again, would also be Adad B'chal, and that's not obvious. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Does Rabbi think that there is a connection between Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and the Egel HaZahav? And do you think there's a connection between the Egel HaZahav, after which Moshe said, please erase me from your Torah, which ends up removing him from Tetzaveh, which is always read on the 7th of Adar, and therefore creating an inherent connection between the Egel HaZahav and Purim?
Well, first of all, there is definitely a connection between Yom Kippur and the Golden Calf. The Golden Calf, Yom Kippur is when we got the pardon for the sin of the Golden Calf. It's not a total pardon. It's not a total relief, because what Kosh Baruch Hu said is, and when the time comes to pay them for the thing that they did, it'll come. And our tradition tells us that comes in gradual amounts throughout Jewish history. It's not as if it's removed, but the initial response that Kosh Baruch Hu said, I'll wipe them all out and make a people out of you, that Kosh Baruch Hu said he's not going to do. And the symptom of the fact that we were given continued existence was the fact that he came back with the second tablets on Yom Kippur, the end of Yom Kippur. So that's definitely connected. Now, what was the second connection you asked about?
If you can connect the sin of the golden calf to Purim, because Moshe said, if you don't forgive Bnei Yisrael, erase me from your Torah, and therefore he erased him from Parshat Tetzaveh, which always falls either the week of, I think it's the week of the 7th of Adar, the whole thing of Purim.
Let me think about that for a second.
No, so that was the lot that Haman drew was the 7th of Adar, and he's like, but he thought that was going to be an unfortunate time.
Things are getting mixed up now. The lot that he drew was the 13th of Adar.
Or 13th of Adar. But wasn't there something that he thought that this was going to be a fortunate time because it was when Moshe died, but it turns out Moshe was born on the same day? Right.
But the lot was he thought it was going to be the fortunate month. Because the month in which Moshe died.
Is when Moshe
died.
passed away. So
That's
the point is that's a direct connection to burn.
I don't think so. Indeed, there was another incident of potential destruction for the Jewish people in the wilderness itself with the spies. And of course, Baruch said exactly the same thing. I'll wipe them out and make a nation out of you. So it doesn't need to wait 1,000 years to find something where his statement about Mechenino would be applied. And he didn't say it that time. So it's not clear that idea of blot me out is going to carry over to future events. So I don't see a direct connection there. Yeah.
There's a quick clarification. Did you say with the until being inclusive or exclusive? Did you say it was inclusive or exclusive, or you just noted that it was ambiguous?
I'm noting that it's ambiguous. By Chavuz read to me this morning, I didn't have the Sefer open where I was. I'm from the Pischei Tshuva, and he did cite, maybe it was a Sfas Emes, Mirso Salanter, who said that not knowing the difference between Blessed is Mordechai and Curses Haman is the limit of not the goal, but it's like the limiting line. Don't step onto the line. So you're supposed to be happy, joyful, and celebrating the whole day, but you sort of have that line in mind. Say, I'm not going there, up to, but that's all. I think that's the way he explained it. So, but I'm just saying that it didn't occur to me to ask the question until this morning. I wish I had asked it 60 years ago. Whenever you have ad, the first question you ask is, does it mean ad ve'ad b'cha or ad ve'lo ad b'cha? Should have occurred to me many, many years ago.
Second question. Yeah. I've heard an idea that the hanging of Haman's 10 sons somehow predicts the hanging of 10 Nazis 10 of the head Nazis in Germany. And like the letters in the names of Haman's sons are like different sizes, or like they're like some number of letters are like slightly different sizes that allude to the year of the
1840.
yeah.
He's talking about the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't say authoritatively that it isn't such a hint. I don't know of great Torah scholars and pious individuals who have said it is such a hint. And I will point out that in that passage there are other out of size letters besides the ones that they use for that prediction. It's at least one, maybe there are more. I don't know. I can't say one way or the other. Yeah.
What are some behaviors that would indicate on Purim? What are some behaviors that would indicate that a person has successfully incorporated certain habits that their body follows their soul? I think is the way.
That's very interesting. If you go to great people who do drink more than usual and it affects their behavior, what you usually see is an outpouring of love for other Jews, love for the Torah, love for mitzvos, which usually their innate tznius, or their practiced tznius, I should say, not innate, would not allow. You know, the things that they feel in their hearts, but they don't express because of privacy. On Purim they come out, and then you get a peek into that person's life, his inner experiential life, which usually his conscious mind says should be private, and now so then you say, well, that's where he is. That's where that's where the rest of him is. It's just that he keeps under wraps. But it's not like me when I'm dreaming of taking a nap in the middle of learning the Talmud and thinking, no, I got to keep going. Right? They're not like that. And I say, did the Gaon of Vilna have any trials of fighting off the Yetzer Hara? So you think, what could have tempted him? What could have disturbed him or bothered him in any way? And there is a story which answers that question. a malach or some kind of message came to him from above. We're offering you an injection of Torah. An injection of Torah. Just give you gigantic amount of Torah understanding. And he said, it's not worth it unless I do it on my own. Unless I give. He has to say no to Torah. I'm sure that was a struggle. So that even he can have things where he has to be able to say no. But it's not the kind of things that we have to say no to. And Kodesh Baruch Hu wants different struggles. It's not that we're less important to Kodesh Baruch Hu than he, because he's on that level and we're on this level. Kodesh Baruch Hu has, it's like in an army. There are different jobs that have to be done by different soldiers. I think it's the British who said in the Second World War, even those who stand and wait, even those serve who stand and wait. Suppose the army says, we don't want the enemy to go there, we're putting this force there so that they know they can't break it and they won't go there. So the guys who are going there don't even have to load their guns. The whole point is the enemy will see that and they won't go there. But if they aren't there, the enemy will go there. So being there is serving. That's what they have to do. So the different people have different things to do. I think that's a symptom of when things come out. By the way, I'll tell you a story. Maybe this will give you an example, because it also comes out when people are caught unawares, when things happen that they can't anticipate. There's a story. It's various versions of various people, but here's the idea. A great rabbi hired a non-Jewish servant to serve in his household a few weeks before Pesach. Well, she's not Jewish. She doesn't know much about what we do. And, before Pesach, things were very busy. And then, the day before Pesach, there was nobody in the house. And she wakes up, and the little children are in the house, and they wake up, and they're hungry. So she goes to the cupboard, gives them some food, and the cupboard is bare, empty, nothing there. What happened to all the food? She doesn't know. They took out all the food, and now they're going to get the shipment of Pesach food, and in the meantime, there was nothing there. And the children are crying. So desperately, she starts ransacking the house, and at the bottom of a chest of clothes, she finds a box. And in that box, there's some crackers. Crackers. Good. And she feeds them to the children. Okay. Comes the night of the Seder, and the rabbi's setting up the table, and then he says, bring the matzahs. The matzahs where I personally went out to the field and supervised the harvesting of the grain, and I went with them to the mill to supervise the grinding of the flour, and I supervised the baking of them. That I had put my love and my supervision and my care and my thoughts into them. Bring out the matzahs. Okay, so someone goes to the chest of clothes and opens it up and looks in and says, they're gone. They're gone. At this point, the maid thinks, I'm dead. Something terrible has happened here. For some reason, for these Jews, those crackers were very important, and I know where they went, and nobody else does. So with tremendous fear and trepidation, she goes to the rabbi and she says, Rabbi, the crackers, it was in the morning, and the children were crying, and there wasn't any food, and I was desperate to find something for them. So I fed the crackers to the children. He said to her, oh, you fed the crackers to the children? Bring normal matzahs, let's start the Seder. He's going full steam ahead to a precious once-a-year mitzvah. A once-a-year mitzvah in which he invested many, many hours of effort and love and care. And now it's gone. What does he think about? He thinks, how am I going to treat this servant in a way that she isn't upset, that she isn't hurt? That's what's in his mind. He didn't prepare for that. He couldn't see that coming. But that's what he's trained himself to look at. That's what he's trained himself to look at. And this isn't loss of money. This isn't loss of reputation. This is loss of a mitzvah. Something about which is appropriate to be concerned. And yet, he didn't let his concern cause him to injure a non-Jewish servant. I think that's exquisite example of somebody who's really trained himself deep down. He's really trained himself deep down. Yeah.
So, as far as drinking on Purim, if you know that you've been training your body to follow the mitzvahs, draw yourself closer to Hashem. For about Tshuva, let's say you've been in yeshiva for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you're doing great. You've been coming every single shiur, you're going to Shabbos and Kamara, you feel very connected, but you've only been doing it for 3-4 weeks. How can you trust that even if your mindset, like Avi said, you're someone who can control yourself, you feel like your head's in the right spot, but then again, you never know. Like, if something comes seeping out that you're not expecting,
I think that trusting after 3 or 4 weeks would be very extravagant. And I think one of the things you can test yourself with psychologically is, suppose I was hit with something like this, totally unexpected, and depriving me of something which it's right to want, right to desire, and I invested in, how would I respond? Instantly. And if you probably would have a suffix about that, probably have a doubt about that. It would be hard to predict. And the very fact that it's hard to predict means that you can't rely on it. That's what I would say, yeah.
Actually, going back to what he said, isn't there a connection within the shekel? Sorry, the shekel. The half shekel that we do to the egel. I can't pronounce it. Sorry, machatzis. No, it's not.
No. The half shekel that we gave to the building of the tabernacle, Chazal say, was to offset the shekels that Haman offered to the king to have us killed.
So Rabbi Madelon said earlier that I think it's the left. I think we learn in Shkolim, right, that it went to the specific building of one of the things. What did you say it was?
The hooks.
The hooks.
Yeah, and the Adanim also.
The Tumid offerings, which were brought, I believe. I think he was saying to kind of correct the incident of the egel. I might be wrong.
Okay, but all right, but that's not connected to Purim. He asked about being connected to Purim. You're making a different connection. I mean, first of all, there is a difference of opinion whether the entire construction of the tabernacle was as a result of the golden calf or not. And the problem is this: all the instructions on how to make the tabernacle are in Truma Tetzaveh, which is before this week's parsha, in which you have the story of the golden calf. So if I read the events in order, because Baruch Hu gave the instructions before the event of the golden calf took place. According to that point of view, the Mishkan was not designed to react to the sin of the golden calf.
Isn't it a known thing, though, that the Torah is not necessarily in any specific order?
Well put. Exactly right. Well put. It's not necessarily in particular order, and that's why there's a difference of opinion about it. It's not necessarily out of order either.
So there
There are opinions that it was for the sake of a kapara, an atonement for the sin of the golden calf, and there are other opinions it's not so.
No, but I'm saying there are opinions that say that the Torah is straight out in order.
No. You have to be careful now.
Sorry.
When you say not necessarily A, that includes also not necessarily not A. They're both not necessary. They're both not necessary. And that means sometimes it could be one way and sometimes it could be the other way.
Oh, so we're saying that at certain points it could be out of order and certain points it could not. It won't be out of order.
Correct. That's correct.
But we don't
And,
know.
and here, there's a difference of opinion between the commentators whether it's out of order or not.
But they all agree that it's not in any specific kind of order. I mean, well, it's not specific. That's sorry, not not necessarily.
It definitely now that's a third thing. Wait a minute, that's the third thing. It definitely is in a specific order. The question is whether it's in chronological order. That's all we're talking about here. Whether it's chronological order or not. Okay. Yeah.
I think we had talked about this before it was pushed off. Why was it that Mordecai didn't bow down to Haman? Because we said it was not.
Oh, I meant to tell you this. Okay, let me tell you what Odessa says here. And then I'll have to leave you with this. I forgot to do this. Odessa says that there is a subtext he doesn't use that term in the incidents of the Megillah, and he's basing himself on certain rabbinic commentaries. Others take things other ways. So if you hear people describe it otherwise, it's because he used these commentaries. The first step was the celebration of Achashverosh. What was he celebrating? Well, he was celebrating the downfall of Jewish prophecy. We spoke about this. There was a prophecy that after 70 years, the Jews would be redeemed and go back to the land of Israel, and the temple would be rebuilt. And according to his calculation, it didn't happen. I don't think I mentioned this, but you probably heard it, that he put on the clothes of the high priest, and he celebrated with the vessels like that, I did tell you, of the temple, which had been in the warehouse from Nebuchadnezzar, and they celebrated the downfall of Jewish. So, and everyone's going to be there. It's for the entire empire. There was an invitation to Jews also. So some Jews came to Mordecai, who was one of the heads of the Sanhedrin, and said, Mordecai, shall we go to the party or not? He said, don't go. And they said, listen, Mordecai, why not? I mean, it'll be very conspicuous if everybody goes and we don't. Why shouldn't we go? And Mordecai said, it's my judgment that you shouldn't go. Yeah, but Mordecai, this is dangerous. I mean, tell us, where does it say in Jewish law that you can't go? If it says in Jewish law you can't go, then we won't go, but tell us. And he said, I'm telling you, you shouldn't go. So what did they do? They went. What happened as a result of their going? Nothing at all. For years, everything stayed the same. What was their reaction? Look, Mordecai is a great scholar. He's in his ivory tower. And if we had any questions about Jewish scholarship, we'd definitely go to him. But practical affairs, how to run the world, he's out of touch. And, what can we do? Then Haman becomes the high prime minister. And the king makes the law that everybody has to bow down to Haman. And according to Rav Dessler, we're going with the idea that it was just a legal law. That's all. He didn't make himself into an idol or wear an idol around his neck. It was just a legal law. They're supposed to bow down. And everybody's bowing down except Mordecai. And as some people point out, not only wasn't he bowing down, but he wasn't staying home. Mordecai, just stay home. No, you have this thing in your face, Haman. You say to bow down, not me. Watch, in public, I'm not going to bow down. Why are you doing that, Mordecai? This could be dangerous. The guy's unhinged. And he's erratic. He could do all sorts of crazy things. And Mordecai says, it's my judgment not to bow down. But why, Mordecai? Where does it say you can't bow down? I'm telling you, you shouldn't bow down. What's the result of that? A decree of annihilation against the Jewish people. What does the chorus say? Mordecai is dangerous. Look at this. He's so out of touch. He's so brazen. Doesn't use his common sense that he brought this terrible decree of destruction against us. Now, Rav Dessler ends his essay by saying, we now, with 2020 hindsight, seeing the whole outcome of the Purim story, know that Mordecai was right. But he sure didn't look right, did he? Well, this is symptomatic sometimes of Das Torah. Das Torah is based on the principles that the Creator revealed to us how he runs the world. And for those who aren't familiar with all of them in a deep level, the decisions of Das Torah may appear to be out of touch. Well, that's part of your challenge, to overcome how it appears to you. And to realize that it may very well be what the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants. That's the lesson that Rav Dessler sees in these events. I want to add something else to it. I really believe that if I told it to Rav Dessler, he would say, of course I meant that, but he didn't write it, so I'm putting it on in my own name. What turned the situation around? When we spoke about this, we did the Megillah, but I didn't stress this aspect of it. What turned it around was Mordecai said to Esther to go in and appeal to the king. She says, I haven't been called, and the rule is to die, and so forth and so on. And he says to her, you got to do it now. And she says, okay, fast for me. Fast for 3 days and 3 nights. I'll go in. And Mordechai sends back a message and says, but one of the nights is the night of the Seder. And you're telling us to fast. So that means we're not going to be able to do the mitzvah of eating matzah, which is a biblical commandment. How can we win God's favor by violating his commandment? And she says back, you told me it was urgent, and if Haman is successful, who will eat matzah next year? It's life and death. I'm telling you not to eat matzah. And the pasuk says, Vayara Mordechai, which the Midrash tells us to mean, Mordechai crossed over his own understanding, his own judgment, and did according to what Esther said. Now, I imagine that not only Mordechai figured out this objection, anybody could figure out a 3-day fast, violating a biblical commandment. How can that be in our favor? And what does Esther say? It's my judgment that it should be done that way. My judgment. And they all listen. And they all do it. Even with the objection stated. They all do it. I think that's the turning point. That's the correction of that idea of rebelling against the Das Torah coming from above and saying, yeah, but I have a brain also and I can figure things out. Don't tell me what to do. I know how to handle sociological problems, economic problems, psychological problems, and you go back to your numerical studies and leave me alone. That's murder. That's suicide. That's suicide. So here, Mordechai saw that the hour didn't require this, or required not bowing down to him. He saw it in terms of his understanding of the circumstances of what's going on, both on the surface and in terms of their divine providence. And this goes back, I also just mentioned this in passing, when Esther sends a message with Asach to find out what's going on, she says to Asach, ask Mordechai, Mazeh ve'al Mazeh. Rabbi Meisman, from whom I've learned a great deal, says there are 2 questions here. Mazeh means what's going on. What's motivating the king? What's motivating Haman? And what are the pressures? And who are our enemies? And who are our allies? What's the circumstance? What's going on? The al mazeh means what purpose is it serving? What does divine providence want from this? And both questions are important. Of course, if you learn the psychology, sociology, economics, military science, and don't know what God wants, you're desperately lacking in your understanding of the situation. But if you know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants people to do tshuva, and you don't know what's pushing, you don't know where the pressure is coming from, then you don't know how to respond to it. So you need to know both to have a complete picture. And Mordechai is using his understanding of the complete picture in order to determine that it wasn't right to him to bow down. That's not an answer in detail. I don't know all the details, but that's where the locus of the answer is, according to Rav Dessler's essay. I think Rav Dessler's essay is extremely important to keep in mind, because the idea of Das Torah is an idea which is under pressure from certain quarters in our times. So we have to resist that pressure. Okay? Have a wonderful, wonderful Purim. A wonderful Purim.